Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. Can one of your clients be your mentor? Why not? I mean, there are so many different types of mentoring relationships, some formal, others informal, some paid, others unpaid, some explicit, and others you don't even realize until years later that that's what it was all about. As a mentor myself, I've experienced all types and have a bit of a natural bias, I would say, toward a more formalized arrangement with explicit goals and boundaries, since that's what I offer. But that said, I do love hearing, and I loved hearing about the informal relationship that George Deering had with one of her clients early on in her career, someone who mentored her because that was just his nature. She learned so much through that relationship, which she has since internalized and passed along to those she has mentored over the years, and now also in her role as marketing manager of a manufacturer. It's super interesting, so listen and learn. Hello, George. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Elise. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm George Deering, or Georgiana Deering, but you can call me George.
I like to call you George.
Yeah, everybody. That's what I've called myself for forever.
Mm-hmm.
I am the commercial marketing manager at Melnor Inc., and we are the leading above ground watering manufacturer in the United States. But I haven't always had this role. You and I first met when I was the owner of Water Street Marketing and Design, where I was the vendor to manufacturers like Melnor, in fact, including Melnor years ago. So
I don't think I realized that, actually, that Melnor had been a client of yours years ago.
Yes, they have an in-house graphics team, which I now lead. But several years ago, they had a very large branding project. At that time, they just had two employees, the manager and a graphic designer, and the volume was way too high. So they farmed it out to my agency. I used to run we called it Mac users group because so many years ago you couldn't get tech help. And Dan Carter, the man who had this role at that time, was a member. So we kind of all knew each other in town. And
networking.
Networking. And so when this project came up, he just said, "Hey, I need some help." And so he passed a bunch of projects off to us, and we updated the branding and handed him back to him. And it's kind of funny that years later, when I had actually downsized to do consulting and coaching, and then we had the lovely pandemic where I downsized even further and then was in my home and realized I needed more stimulus. I missed being part of a team. And this opportunity came up to actually sort of be the head of a creative team again, but inside a company.
Yeah, going over to the other side, as we sometimes call it.
Yeah, I'm on the other side now.
And how long has it been since you've been on the other side?
Well, I came to Melnor in May of 2024, right at the beginning of the month. So I've been here about a year and a half.
Yeah. All right. And we want to talk today about your mentor. So tell us, connect those dots. Who are you talking about, and how did that relationship develop, and what did you learn? And I'll just interrupt you as you go and dig in more.
Sure. Well, first of all, you were my mentor when I was a small business owner.
Yes.
And that's how we met many years ago.
Yes.
But as far as my career goes, and really being able to provide above the bar services for manufacturers. I worked with Bob Roberts, who was with National Fruit at the time, and he really had a huge impact on my career and how I approach my clients, and just taught me so much about the business.
Which
But this,
business?
which is and the business of marketing for manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a highly specialized B2B environment, in that when people think about products that are on the shelf and they think about packaging, immediately they think about the consumer experience. And a lot of creative agencies will zero in on what the shopper is going to do, which is great and it's very important, and you need to be well versed in that. But what the manufacturer needs is all the other tools that help them get to that shelf. I had a lot of help from another career mentor, Joe Desarn. He told me a lot about like kind of the tools he needed. But the thing that Bob Roberts did for me is he was a client who gave me room to make decisions. Like, I remember being on a photo shoot with him for some product packaging for a new product. We were trying to shoot a peach flavor in February because that's the deadline we were on, and and you cannot get beautiful peaches in February. I had to get fake ones, and we went over to the studio with the food photographer, and he was really there only for emergencies. He pretty much left me to do what I needed to do. He said, "Look, your job is to make this work for me. I need it to appeal this way and that, and it needs to work on the packaging." And then he pretty much gave me room to sort of run things, which had never happened before in a client relationship, where he just said,
Why? What usually happens or used to happen?
what usually happens is the person on the client side in manufacturing has a title of marketing, and they've usually come up through a creative background, and they usually want to be the creative director.
Hmm.
So they want to tell you how to do things, and you end up kind of it's a you're delivering creative to a creative, which can be a sticky situation. And Bob was a creative. Like, it wasn't that he wasn't creative, it was that he was giving me room to be a partner in the experience. What he wanted from me was to add value. He didn't want me to just take orders.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like fun and liberating, and like, this is what I want. But it was more because he was a person that I didn't know before. I didn't really know him that well. So that was like the first time where I thought, oh, I have a voice in this relationship. Like, he values what I'm doing, and he gave me room to make decisions. And the other thing that he did is, when he gave feedback, he took time to explain why the company needed to make choices in a specific direction, or why this was important to National Fruit, where, like, these things that you wouldn't normally see in just looking at like a layout or a proof for a copy document. You would say, well, we tried this in the past. We had a product that featured bananas this way, and we found out that it didn't focus group test in this direction. And he said, so I have that knowledge coming into this. So when you're making choices, use that with you, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He also shared financial information with me that
Hmm.
was usually behind the scenes. And he shared, this is what it is costing us to put this test into this region of Florida. This is why this team is so like uptight about these deadlines. It's because this dollar amount is riding on this. And it was just very helpful and thoughtful in a very uplifting manner. And he gave me a lot of room to make mistakes. And when I made mistakes, instead of like getting all huffy about it, he taught me like
Mm-hmm.
how to correct them, which is a very rare in a client relationship. And it had happened so early in what I was doing, probably within the first 2 or 3 years, probably within the first 2 years of us narrowing in on this manufacturing niche that we did when I was with Water Street, that it was just very impactful, and it made me smarter and a better service provider going forward.
So let me just dig into a couple of the things I hear you saying.
Hmm.
So I guess let me just clarify also. You said 2 years into you're focusing on this particular niche of manufacturers, but how far into your business running Water Street was this?
Let me see. Let's see, this was 96 when I started with Water Street, and we didn't narrow our focus until like 2000.
Okay. So
So
within
about,
approximately 5 or 6 years, it sounds like.
yeah, within 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
Um,
And one thing I find interesting in what you're saying is that your client essentially became not just your partner, which is the ideal situation with a client, but also your mentor. And I'm curious if he was aware, like, was it formal or just informal? Did he think of himself as your mentor, or did you think of it that way, but maybe later? Because it sounds like that's just his way of being. And you, because you happen to be in his orbit, were benefiting from that. But when people think about mentors, and even when they come to me as a mentor, it's a very explicit type of thing. They're looking for a mentor. I'm talking about how I work as a mentor. There's a paid, version of it, and it's all very formalized, if not formal. So, but it sounds like what you're describing is very different from that.
it is. It was very informal. It just happened along the way,
Hmm.
and I only got to work with him for about 3 years. He sadly passed away, but his daughter ended up being a good friend of my niece, and I later was able to tell Laura like how much your dad meant to me, because he was so generous of
Mm-hmm.
spirit. He was generous with his information, he was generous with his time, and that really was the part that was probably, I think that was just his nature. And I don't know, I later I look at it and I go, oh, he had two daughters, and I don't, maybe that was just an extension of that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasn't that young, but it was he was just so giving in nature. And it was very natural. So I never got to tell him, but I did tell his daughter
Mm-hmm.
that he had such an impact on my career. And
Mm-hmm.
it was, and I was aware of it as it was happening, like, man, what a gift that I would come back from these meetings, and I would say, I had a business partner at the time, and I would say, "You wouldn't believe how today went. He just said, go do this." And, at one point on a photo shoot, he said, "You know what? There's an art exhibit down the street. I'm going to duck out for about 3 hours because I want to go look at this. You've got this handled." And I thought, oh, this is insane. Like, just because I felt so green,
Yeah.
and that I'd been handed the reins to the project.
So it sounds like there you're also talking about, I don't know, an insecurity or a lack of self confidence that obviously over the years you gained. And it makes me wonder also, because a lot of the people I work with feel very, I don't know, like imposter syndrome in a way with some of their clients, or maybe all of their clients if they're just starting out. And it sounds like even though you were 5 or 6 years into your business, you were able to, despite, whatever insecurity you may have felt, not let that get in the way of you doing the job you needed to do and being vulnerable, it sounds like almost in a way that allowed you to learn, which is kind of what I think you have to do with a mentor, whether it's, explicit or not.
Yeah, he made it comfortable for me to say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something that happens, it isn't just about youth. I think the nature of what we're in, we get rejected a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and we often don't know why. And there's a lot of jokes in the industry about how awful the client is. I think there's like somebody used to have Twitter feed about horrible clients, and they would say, and there's always the jokes about make the logo bigger and
Right.
things like that. And it was all about how bad the client is. And I would read them and think, you don't know why they're saying that. And usually there's a reason why they're saying we can't do that or don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he was doing was giving me a peek at his side of the table, why he's making the choices he's making. That was really helpful because sometimes your hands are tied.
Right.
um, and it taught me to ask better questions.
That's interesting. Say more about that if you can.
It took me a while to work this out, but I started doing kickoff meetings and establishing some, like, I started asking, what does success look like for you,
Mm-hmm.
to try and get them to tell me that. But then I also said, are there things that we need to be aware of that would make this project fail? And every time I had a project get kicked back for a reason that I thought was, well, I wish I knew that at the start, I would add
Mm.
it, because I had a project kicked back because the senior vice president hated purple.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I need to know that he had nothing to do. He was a stakeholder in the project, but he wasn't my primary contact. And so we go through the whole thing and we get up to, like, we just need to get it approved. And he's like, I hate, why would you put this, is ridiculous. And it was all because he had an aversion to the color purple. I'm like, well, it's not that hard to fix if we know it up front. So it taught me to ask about their interpersonal goals for the project. Like, what's going to make it work for you
Mm-hmm.
within your team? Do you have to send this on to someone else for approval? And
And
just,
what's their
just,
favorite color?
yeah, and I ended
Or
up
what are their
using,
pet peeves? Mm-hmm.
yeah, I ended up using that. Like, does somebody have a pet peeve because I've had
Mm-hmm.
something rejected over a color choice? And, and that's helpful because it's things that you wouldn't normally put in a brief or a quote, but it helps you sort of deliver better results, but then also understand why things are getting knocked down. And so I think this rejection thing really does feed into that imposter syndrome. Like, you think it's wonderful, and then they're like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that."
And I think one of the things I'm hearing also is a mindset issue that you, meaning you, George, but also you, everyone listening and everyone, can control, which is when someone delivers, let's say, that rejection, whether it's a rejection of the first draft of the work or a rejection of your proposal in the first place, you have a choice how to respond to that and what attitude to take. And you could be angry and take it personally and just assume that there's something wrong with that client, even if you don't know why they're providing this rejection. Or you can make a different decision, which is, I always think of it as being curious. You're talking about learning to ask better questions. And so, that, to my mind, those things are connected. And you can be curious, I wonder what's going on the other side, if you will, that is forcing this response or reaction. And sometimes you will have an opportunity to ask, and many other times you won't, or they won't tell you, or they can't tell you, or they don't know either. But I just want to put a little spotlight on that moment where you do have control over how you respond and what decision you make about the client. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I kind of latched onto that word curious. Like it's if you can be curious about like, well, why did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's a learning experience, right? You can move things forward from there.
But that also is a choice, which is between what can I learn in this situation versus the one that I think is like a reaction as opposed to a response. I make a distinction between reactions, which are kind of immediate and often very personal and defensive. And that precludes any space for the curiosity and the curiosity. Like the difference, in a way, one could say, well, isn't it also curiosity to have the reaction of what did I do wrong or what was wrong with me or my proposal, as opposed to, I wonder what's going on over there such that this didn't work?
Yeah, I guess you could say, what did I do wrong is curiosity, but it's a little self-flagellating.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, so that room to be a whole person and not perfect every time
Mhm.
was a very generous thing. Confidence, I still feel like an imposter sometimes, but that's just kind of how being part of being human, I think.
Mhm. But I'm curious, as you moved forward and grew your business,
Hmm.
were you able to look for clients who were going to be generous in that way? Not necessarily mentors, but give you the space you needed as opposed to treat you like an order taker? Was that something you could detect because now you have an antenna for it, or sooner rather than later? How did that play out in the evolution of your business?
Well, I always looked for people who would consider us as partners instead of like, order takers. Like, definitely. But you can't avoid them. Even particularly the way my business grew is you get in with a manufacturer and you kind of get in a lather, rinse, repeat. You start getting more of the similar kinds of projects. If you have success, you sort of get handed the next one. But the people change. And so
Mm.
you might have had a great relationship with a great contact and they move on, and the next person in is not confident enough to let you do your thing.
Hmm.
So you have to kind of manage it as you go along. And a lot I started saying is this a solve or a tell? Are you telling me I have to do this way, or are you asking me to solve the problem?
That's interesting. And also, one thing I just want to put a little spotlight on that you said is you were looking to see if they're confident enough to let you do your thing.
Oh yeah.
And right? I mean, that's something one could look for and be able to detect. How confident is this client? If you can get your own insecurities and imposter syndrome out of the way to be looking clearly at the client as a person, how confident is this person? And will they let me do what I need to do, what I know how to do?
Yeah, how confident. And there's a nuance there because there's a lot of bossy, overconfident personalities out there,
Right.
but they
How does
really aren't
confidence
confident.
manifest? Exactly.
they're they're forceful, they're forceful and pushy and demanding,
Mm-hmm.
but that isn't really a confident person if they're not comfortable enough to let you be as human as they are. you know, that this is getting kind of philosophical about life, but
True.
yeah, you're looking for people who are able to, they're looking for partners and not
Mm-hmm.
servants, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
I love
But
that. But
but
what?
I would use that ask or solve
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit and with clients over and over again, even partners, because sometimes, or a tell or solve really is
Mm-hmm.
the way I would talk about it. Because even in the spectrum of projects, I might have 100 projects, but 10 of them are tells because they've come from someone else outside the department saying, I need you to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
if they're saying, yeah, this is just a tell, we got to do it and check it off and say we did it. And you go, okay, got it. If it was a tell that I felt was way off base, I would do exactly what they said and say, and these are expected results of that decision. And then I'd say, or we could solve it this way and we might have these results. And
And and that's before you actually deliver, right? They tell you what they need and you say, well, if we did it that way, here's what I think would happen. And here's an alternative that would solve the problem perhaps better with this outcome. So you give them a choice, but you also have an opportunity to be a partner, as it were, and show what you know about strategy or whatever it is you're doing. Is that what you're saying?
sometimes, most of the
Hmm.
time, it was like, okay, I hear you. And you get to first draft, and then you go, I'm going to give you two to compare.
I see. Hmm.
I'll like this can go, we can do it this way, or we can do it that way.
Hmm.
And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Hmm.
Sometimes they'd say, I see what you're saying and I love it, but this is coming from so and so out of this department, or this
Right.
is coming from our customer. We don't have any control over it. They are telling the vendor, they are telling us, the manufacturer, that we have to deliver this communication piece this way.
Right.
So there's nothing I can do about it.
Hmm.
And then you go, okay, and then that satisfies that perfectionist inside a lot of creatives, but
Mm.
it also lays to rest like, oh, okay, I get it. We're being asked to do something not optimal, but we're going to do the best we can given this tiny tiny set of rules that we have to follow.
And so let's wrap up with you now on the other side as the marketer or the marketing manager who sometimes outsources some of the things that you do and need. And I would think you are trying to be like Bob.
Mhm.
And, but I don't know, talk a little bit about that. Is this conscious? Is it something people are open to? Do they want it or do they just want to be told what to do?
I'm conscious of it and I try to give as much information as I can,
Hmm.
and I'm happy to give feedback, because I have always wanted, even when I ran my small business, I always wanted partners that added value
Hmm.
and not just labor. So when I'm trying to outsource things, I say, I am asking you to do this because this is what I believe this needs to fill, but I'm open to suggestions when I can do that.
Hmm.
Sometimes I can't.
Hmm.
And if I can't, I say, this one's a tell. We just got to do it.
Hmm.
And I do that with my team too. Sometimes I'm like, you just got to do the thing I'm telling you, and and if it's bad, we're gonna see what we can do with it afterward.
Yep. I love that.
Yeah, so that's it. I try, and it's partly because I've been on the other side, and
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the impact that a bigger company can have on a
Mhm.
small vendor. And I enjoyed relationships like that when I was on the outside, where people were trying to be considerate of a small business, given the framework of an organization. So I try to do that as well because
Mhm.
it, makes everybody happy. We get better work when we're happy.
Yeah. And I imagine maybe we could generalize this a little bit to say that, you, because of your experience, are probably a really good client to have. And if we wanted to clone someone like you, maybe we could, on someone's LinkedIn profile, look to see if they've been self employed themselves or run a small agency or a small business and have that experience of knowing what it's like on the other side. And maybe now they're on the buying side. Do you think that could work?
I think it would be helpful. Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
lot of marketing people who switch from running a small business to the inside. There's things I don't have to do anymore that I'm okay with. So
Mhm.
uh, it happens a lot. It's a good place to start for sure.
All right, excellent. Tell the people where they can find you online, George.
Oh, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Georgiana Deering. The company I work for is melnor.com. And please don't tell me my website needs to be updated. It's in the process.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for sharing what you've learned. And I've enjoyed knowing you all these years and being able to follow your progress and then bring you on to share what you know. I always say that I like to bring on guests who are practicing what I preach, and you definitely fit that description.
Well, thank you, Elise. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Wasn't that interesting? Think about who may be mentoring you without you even knowing it, or who could. And if you want my help figuring all of this out, or maybe even mentoring you, I hope you'll take advantage of my free mentoring session. You can find that and lots more resources, including my simplest marketing plan, at marketing-mentor.com. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.